There is a specific kind of loneliness that does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a dramatic conversation or a slammed door, or the kind of confrontation that at least has the dignity of being noticed. It arrives in the accumulation of small absences, the birthday that passes without a call, the holiday table that is set for everyone except the person sitting alone in a house that used to be full, the Sunday afternoons that stretch into evenings without a single message from a single person who shares your blood. My name is Arthur Wallace Prescott. I am 68 years old. For 10 years, 10 full years, 3,652 days, my family forgot I existed. Not forgot in the careless way of busy people who mean well and fall short. Forgot in the deliberate way of people who have decided, consciously and without guilt, that a person is no longer worth their time. I know the difference. I had 10 years to learn it, what they did not know, what none of them knew during those 10 years of silence and absence and unreturned calls, was that I had spent that entire decade doing something very specific with the time they had given me. I had built something considerable, and on a Wednesday morning in October, I made a phone call that ended the life they had been living and began the one they deserved. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Get comfortable. This one took 10 years to arrive. It is worth every minute. Let me tell you about my family before I tell you what they did and what I did about it. Because this story is not about villains. It is about something more ordinary and in some ways more devastating than villainy. It is about people who simply stopped showing up. I had 3 children. Past tense in the emotional sense, present tense in the biological one. My oldest, Richard, was 44. He was a financial consultant in Boston. Successful, busy, a man who measured his days in billable hours and his relationships in their demands on his schedule. He had a wife named Caroline and 2 children I had met 4 times in the last decade. My middle child, Patricia, was 41. She lived in Denver, worked in hospital administration, and had, over the course of the last 10 years, developed the specific skill of being technically present without being actually available. She returned text occasionally. She sent Christmas cards with printed signatures. She had called on my last 3 birthdays, each time for under 4 minutes, which I know because I kept the phone records. Not out of bitterness. Out of the same habit that made me keep every other record in my life. My youngest, Thomas, was 38. Thomas was the one who had started it. Though started is perhaps the wrong word for something that happened so gradually. He had married a woman named Diane 6 years into the drift, and Diane had opinions about where Thomas spent his energy, and Thomas had made a series of small choices that added up, over time, to a son who called his father twice a year and visited once, briefly, at Christmas, in the specific way of someone fulfilling an obligation they have decided is the minimum acceptable. My wife, Eleanor, had passed 11 years ago. Cancer, quick and merciless, the kind that does not give you time to say what should have been said. After Eleanor passed, I had expected, I will be honest about this expectation, that my children would draw closer. That loss would do what loss sometimes does, remind people of what matters, pull a family toward its center. Instead, the opposite happened. Within 18 months of Eleanor's death, the calls had thinned, the visits had stopped. Richard was busy. Patricia was overwhelmed. Thomas was building his new life with Diane, and I was alone in the house on Maple Creek Road that Eleanor and I had built together over 32 years, surrounded by the specific silence of a life that used to be full. For a year, I waited. For 2 years, I reached out, called, left messages, sent emails that were answered briefly or not at all. Drove to Boston for Richard's birthday and was told at the door that it was not a good time. They had guests, perhaps next time. By the 3rd year, I had understood. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not busyness or distance or the ordinary friction of adult children building their own lives. This was a decision. Unconscious perhaps in its origins, but conscious in its execution. I had been categorized by the 3 people I had raised and loved and sacrificed for as optional. I spent 1 more year grieving that. And then, in year 5, I stopped grieving and started building. I want to be precise about this because precision matters and because I am, by nature and by 40 years of professional habit, a precise man. I had retired 3 years before Eleanor passed from a career in civil engineering. 38 years, the last 15 as a partner at a firm that handled infrastructure projects across the southeastern United States. I had a pension, I had savings, I had Eleanor's life insurance, I had the house on Maple Creek Road, paid off in 2009. I was not wealthy, I was comfortable. There is a difference, and I had always understood it clearly. What I had, in year 5 of my family's absence, was time. Extraordinary quantities of time, and the particular focused attention of a man who has nothing to distract him from thinking clearly. I had spent 40 years solving complex engineering problems. The fundamental skill of that work was not mathematics or technical knowledge, those were tools. The fundamental skill was the ability to look at a system, understand how it actually functioned versus how it was supposed to function, and identify where value was being lost and how to recover it. I applied that skill to a problem I understood completely: real estate. Not the flashy, speculative real estate of people who watch television programs about flipping houses. The quiet, methodical real estate of a civil engineer who understood construction costs, structural assessment, zoning regulations, and the specific mathematics of long-term rental income. I started small. In year 5, I purchased a duplex 3 miles from the house on Maple Creek Road. It needed work. I knew exactly what work it needed and exactly what it would cost because I had spent 4 decades doing this kind of assessment professionally. I did much of the work myself, hired specialists for what I could not do, and had it rented within 4 months. The returns were modest, but they were real, and they were mine, and they gave me something I had not had since Eleanor passed. A reason to get up in the morning that had nothing to do with waiting for a phone call that was not coming. In year 6, I bought 2 more properties. In year 7, 3. I reinvested every dollar of rental income, lived modestly on my pension and savings, and spent my evenings doing what I had always done best: analyzing systems, identifying inefficiencies, finding value that other people had missed. By the end of year 8, I had 12 properties generating consistent monthly income. By the end of year 9, I had 17. In year 10, I sold 11 of them to a regional property management company that had been watching my portfolio with interest for 2 years and made an offer that my accountant, a careful woman named Louise Chen, described as, and I am quoting directly, "Arthur, this is extraordinary." The number was $4.7 million. After taxes, fees, and the costs of the transaction, the net was $3.1 million, deposited into an account that had only my name on it. I sat in Louise's office on a Thursday afternoon in September and looked at the number on the statement she had prepared. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney, a man named James Whitfield, who had handled my affairs for 20 years, and who I had asked 2 months earlier to begin preparing a specific set of documents. "The sale is complete," I said. "I'll have everything ready by end of week," James said. "Thank you," I said. I drove home to the house on Maple Creek Road, made dinner, sat on the back porch in the September evening, and watched the light go out of the sky over Eleanor's garden, which I had maintained for 11 years because she had loved it, and because some things you maintain not for practical reasons, but because maintaining them is how you keep faith with someone you loved. I thought about 10 years, about the birthday that had passed without calls, about the Christmas I had spent alone because Thomas had Diane's family that year, and Richard had a trip planned, and Patricia had sent a gift card with a printed note, about the 3-minute phone calls and the unreturned emails and the door in Boston that had been closed politely in my face. I thought about the duplex on Henderson Street that had been the beginning of everything, and I thought about what James Whitfield was preparing. James had been my attorney for 20 years and had known Eleanor and had attended her funeral and was, in the specific way of people who have known you through the worst moments, someone I trusted completely. When I had walked into his office 2 months earlier and told him what I wanted, he had listened to the entire thing without interrupting. Then he had asked 3 questions. Were the decisions I was making the result of clear thinking rather than temporary emotion? Whether I had considered all the implications, and whether I was certain. I told him I had been thinking about this for 5 years, that I had considered every implication, and that I had never been more certain of anything since the day I proposed to Eleanor. He had nodded and opened his notepad. What James prepared over the following 2 months was a complete restructuring of my estate. My existing will, prepared 14 years ago, before the drift had become permanent, when I had still believed that time and distance were temporary conditions rather than choices, had divided my estate equally among Richard, Patricia, and Thomas. The new will was different. Richard's share went to the Civil Engineering Scholarship Fund I had established at the State University, where I had gotten my degree. A fund that would, at the levels I was funding it, support 4 full scholarships per year indefinitely. Patricia's share went to a hospice organization in Eleanor's name. Eleanor had spent her last weeks in a hospice facility whose staff had treated her with a dignity and gentleness that I had never forgotten and never would. Thomas's share went to a literacy foundation. Eleanor had been a reader, a passionate and devoted reader, and had volunteered at the public library for 15 years, and this felt right in a way I could not fully articulate, but did not need to. My 3 grandchildren, Richard's 2 children, and Thomas's son from his first marriage whom I had met twice, Each received a direct bequest of $100,000, held in trust until they turned 25. They were children. They had made no choices about their parents' behavior. They deserved to be treated accordingly. The house on Maple Creek Road went to a land trust for conservation, Eleanor's garden included, which gave me a specific and genuine peace when James read that provision back to me. Richard, Patricia, and Thomas received nothing. Not as punishment, I want to be clear about that. Punishment implies a desire to cause pain, and I had spent 5 years moving through the desire to cause pain and arriving somewhere quieter and more honest on the other side. Not punishment, accuracy. My estate would go to the things and people and organizations that had actually been present in my life, that had actually shown up, that had not decided, somewhere around year 3 of a grief they did not bother to share with me, that I was optional. James filed the documents on a Friday. The following Wednesday, I made the calls. I called Richard first. 8 in the morning, Boston time. He would be at his desk. He picked up on the third ring with the slightly distracted energy of someone managing multiple things simultaneously. Dad. Mild surprise. I had not called in over a year. Hey, everything okay? Everything is fine, I said. I'm calling because I've made some changes to my estate and I wanted you to hear it from me directly. A pause. The specific quality of attention that the word estate produces in people who have been expecting an inheritance. What kind of changes? Complete ones, I said. I've restructured everything. I wanted you to know before you heard it from anyone else. Dad, what does that mean? It means that my estate will be going to several organizations and causes that were important to me and to your mother, I said. The details are with James Whitfield. I can give you his number if you'd like to understand the specifics. Silence. You're cutting us out, Richard said. His voice had changed. The distraction was gone. Something sharper had replaced it. I'm directing my estate to the places and people that have been present in my life, I said. That is a different thing. Dad, Richard, I said. The last time I came to Boston for your birthday, I was told at the door that it wasn't a good time. I paused. That was 6 years ago. You have not visited since. You have called in the last 12 months, twice. Silence. I'm not angry, I said. I want to be clear about that. I'm not calling to have an argument or to make you feel guilty. I'm calling because you are my son and you deserve to hear this from me. Dad, I've been busy. I know, I said. I hope the consulting is going well. Give my best to Caroline. I ended the call. I called Patricia next. She was already in the office. Hospital administration ran early. She listened to the same explanation with less shock than Richard, and more of the specific controlled response of someone managing an emotion they do not want to display. I understand, she said finally. I thought you might, I said. Is this about the last 10 years? It's about the last 10 years, I said. And about the 30 years before that, which I spent building something I believed I was building for a family. I paused. I discovered that the family I had in mind had different plans. She was quiet. Your grandchildren have provisions, I said. They are protected. Whatever you choose to tell them about this, I hope you will be honest. Dad, take care of yourself, Patricia, I said. I mean that genuinely. Thomas was last. He picked up on the first ring, which surprised me. Thomas had always been the one most likely to let calls go to voicemail. He had already heard from Richard. Dad, he said. His voice was different from his siblings. Less controlled, more raw. Is this because of Diane? I considered that question for a moment. It's because of 10 years, I said. Diane was part of those 10 years. So were you. So were your brother and sister. I know I haven't been. He stopped. I know. That was the most honest thing any of my children said in those 3 phone calls, and I sat with it for a moment. Thomas, I said, your son has a trust in his name. $100,000 available when he turns 25. He is a good boy. Make sure he knows his grandfather thought so. A long pause. Dad, his voice cracked. Just slightly. I'm sorry. I know, I said. Take care of yourself, son. I hung up. Sat at the kitchen table in the house on Maple Creek Road for a long time. The morning light was coming through the window over the sink the way it had come through that window for 32 years. Eleanor's garden was visible through the glass. Still tended, still alive. The roses she had planted in 2003, still blooming every September, with the specific stubbornness of things that are well-rooted. I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not relief, not the satisfaction I had perhaps imagined when I had first begun thinking about this 5 years ago. Something quieter. Something that felt, after 10 years of its absence, remarkably like peace. Richard called back twice that day. I let both calls go to voicemail. His messages were long and covered considerable ground. Confusion, then hurt, then something that sounded like the beginning of anger, but did not quite arrive there because even Richard, in his distraction, understood that anger was not a position he could credibly occupy. Patricia sent an email. 3 paragraphs, carefully written, that acknowledged the distance of the last decade in the specific language of someone who has decided to be accountable without being fully honest. I read it twice and did not respond immediately. Thomas did not call again. 3 weeks later, he drove to Maple Creek Road. He did not call ahead. He simply appeared on a Tuesday afternoon, standing on the porch in the way he had stood on porches as a teenager, slightly uncertain, hat in his hands, not entirely sure of his welcome. I opened the door. We sat in the kitchen for 2 hours. He did not ask me to change the will. I want to be clear about that. He sat at the table where he had done homework as a child and he talked about Diane, about the choices he had made, about the specific way that years accumulate into a distance that starts to feel normal until something breaks it open. He cried once. Briefly, with the particular embarrassment of a man in his late 30s who was not expecting to cry. I did not cry. I had done my crying years ago, alone in this house, in ways I had not expected and had not managed particularly gracefully. I can't fix 10 years, he said. No, I said. You can't. Is there anything? There is time, I said. There is always time, until there isn't. What you do with what's left is yours to decide. He nodded. He stayed for dinner. We ate at the kitchen table and talked about his son, my grandson, who was apparently interested in engineering, which made me laugh, genuinely, for the first time in longer than I wanted to calculate. He left at 8 o'clock. At the door he turned and looked at me. Dad, he said, I'm going to do better. I looked at my youngest child, 38 years old, standing in the doorway of the house where he had grown up, saying the most important sentence he had said to me in a decade. I know, I said. I'll be watching. The house on Maple Creek Road sold to the Land Trust in November. I had moved by then to a smaller place 2 towns over, a house with a manageable garden and good light in the mornings and no rooms full of absence. The scholarship fund made its first awards the following spring. 4 students. Engineering. Their names were published in the university newsletter, and I read all 4 of them at the kitchen table in my new house with my coffee, and felt something that Eleanor, I think, would have recognized immediately. Purpose. Richard has not called since the second voicemail. That too is information, and I have filed it where it belongs. Patricia responded to my email. Eventually, we have spoken twice. Carefully, honestly, in the early stages of something that might become real if both of us are willing to do the work. I am willing. Whether she is remains to be seen. Thomas calls every Sunday. Not every other Sunday, not when he remembers. Every Sunday, at 10 in the morning reliably, the way a man calls when he has decided that showing up is a practice, rather than a feeling. Last Sunday, he called and put my grandson on the phone for 5 minutes. The boy is 10 years old and wants to know how bridges work. I told him I knew a few things about that. I told him we could talk about it whenever he wanted. I meant it. Some things take 10 years to build. Some things take 10 years to lose. And some things, the most important ones, can only begin after